If irony had a face, it would have been mine smiling at my best friend's wedding while my heart quietly broke in two. I always thought heartbreak was loud, but that day it was silent, polite, and dressed in pastel chiffon. The California sun was cruelly beautiful that afternoon. Everything looked like a movie. The arch wrapped in white roses, the gentle sea breeze, the laughter of guests carried across the courtyard. And there she was, Amelia Hart, the bride, radiant and devastating, holding her bouquet like she was holding the universe itself. My best friend. And soon someone else's wife. I never intended to fall for her. God, I swear I didn't. I met Amelia during our freshman year at UCLA. She was the kind of person who walked into a room and made it look brighter. I was the quiet one in our group, more likely to be found sketching by the fountain than dancing at frat parties. But Amelia? She was a wildfire. People orbited her without even realizing it. Back then I didn't understand what it meant when my chest tightened every time she laughed, or when I memorized her face without trying. We became inseparable, studying together, traveling together, growing up together. And through every heartbreak she had, I was there, the best friend with a box of tissues and a bottle of cheap red wine. When she met Ethan, I knew things would change. He was everything she thought she wanted: charming, stable, dependable. But sometimes stability can be the quietest form of emptiness. Still, I smiled for her. I watched them fall in love, get engaged, plan their life. And every time I thought about confessing, something inside me whispered, don't ruin it. Don't ruin her happiness. So I didn't. The wedding was at a vineyard outside Santa Barbara, Amelia's dream venue. She had talked about it since college, back when we used to sneak in wine we couldn't afford and pretend we were adults. I helped her plan everything, from the flowers to the playlist, to the personalized vows she wrote but was too nervous to read aloud. I thought I was ready for this. But as she walked down the aisle, radiant under the golden light, something inside me cracked open. She saw me. Just for a second. Our eyes met and the world went quiet. It was the same look she gave me when she got her first job, when her father died, when she whispered thank you for always being here. It was love, but not the kind she was supposed to have for me. And maybe that's what broke me the most. During the reception, I stood near the bar, watching her dance. The music was soft, people clinking glasses, the smell of roses and champagne thick in the air. Ethan spun her around, her laughter echoing under the fairy lights. She looked perfect, and I hated myself for wishing she wasn't. Lena, she said later, when she found me outside by the vineyards. Her voice was soft, the way it always got when it was just the two of us. You disappeared. I turned, trying to smile. Just needed some air. Weddings aren't really my thing. She laughed, that same laugh that once made me believe in something bigger than friendship. You're the reason this wedding even looks like a dream. I couldn't have done it without you. Don't give me that credit. You always knew what you wanted, I said, pretending to admire the horizon instead of her eyes. She stepped closer, her perfume wrapping around me, lilac and rain. You've been quiet lately, she said, searching my face. Ever since the engagement. Did I do something? My throat tightened. I wanted to say no. I wanted to tell her she did everything right. But I also wanted to scream, yes, you did. You made me fall in love with you. Instead, I said, you did nothing wrong, Amelia. You never do. She frowned like she didn't believe me. Then why does it feel like you're saying goodbye? I swallowed hard, forcing a smile. Because maybe I am. Later that night, after the guests had gone and the stars began to scatter across the sky, she found me again. I was sitting on the steps near the vineyard house, heels in hand, mascara probably a mess. You're leaving already? She asked, breathless, holding her gown as she walked toward me. The bride chasing her best friend. It almost felt poetic. Yeah, I said quietly. Long drive back to LA. She sat down beside me, the layers of her dress spilling across the stone steps. For a moment we just listened to the crickets, the ocean waves somewhere far off. Then she whispered, I don't know if I can do this. I turned to her, startled. What do you mean? Her voice trembled. I looked at him today and it felt wrong, like I was pretending. But when I saw you, she stopped herself, shaking her head. God, I shouldn't be saying this. My heart thudded so hard I could barely breathe. Amelia, don't. She looked up, eyes shining with tears. Tell me I'm not crazy. Tell me this, whatever this isn't been one-sided. The silence between us was electric, painful. The kind that feels like standing on a cliff, knowing one step will change everything. I could have lied, but I didn't. I wish I could, I said finally. But I can't. She exhaled shakily, like she'd been holding her breath for years. So I wasn't imagining it. No, I whispered. You weren't. She reached for my hand. For a moment the world felt still. There were no wedding vows, no guests, no expectations. Just two women sitting under the stars, realizing too late what their hearts already knew. I should have told you, I said softly. Years ago. Her eyes searched mine, full of something raw, something terrifying. Maybe it's not too late. But it was. Or at least that's what I told myself. Because love, when it comes at the wrong time, isn't always romantic. Sometimes it's cruel. And as much as I wanted to believe in miracles, I wasn't the kind of woman who stole brides. Not even if the bride's heart already belonged to me. The next morning I drove away before sunrise. The sky was streaked with pink and gold, and my phone buzzed with her message. I don't know what to do. Please don't disappear. I didn't reply. Not yet. Because some loves deserve a moment to breathe before they're reborn. And deep down I knew our story wasn't over. It was just beginning. 3 weeks. That's how long I managed to stay away from her. 3 weeks of silence, unread messages, and unanswered calls. I told myself that was what she needed, space to figure things out, to settle into her new life. But the truth? I was the one who needed distance. Because every time my phone lit up with her name, I felt the ground shift beneath me. Love was supposed to be beautiful. No one told me it could also feel like suffocating under sunlight. Los Angeles was a blur of noise and motion, but nothing could distract me from her. I buried myself in work design projects, client meetings, endless cups of coffee, but Amelia was everywhere. In the songs on the radio. In the scent of lilac perfume on strangers who passed by. In the way my phone stayed stubbornly silent after midnight. Then one day she showed up at my apartment. I opened the door, and there she was standing in the hallway, hair pulled back, eyes red-rimmed but steady. She looked smaller somehow, stripped of the confidence she wore like armor. Hi, she said softly. I froze. You shouldn't be here. She exhaled, voice trembling. I got divorced. The world tilted. What? It wasn't working, she said simply. It never really did. For a second I forgot how to breathe. Amelia, I know, she interrupted, shaking her head. Please don't say anything yet. Just let me in. She stepped inside like she'd never left. The apartment still smelled faintly of her perfume. She'd left it there months ago after one of our sleepovers, long before the wedding. I'd never thrown it away. She sat on my couch, tracing the rim of a mug I handed her, eyes distant. It's strange, she murmured. I thought marriage was supposed to make things feel solid, like a foundation. But all it did was make me feel trapped in a house that never felt like mine. I sat across from her, my heart pounding. Amelia, I didn't want this for you. I never wanted to be the reason. You're not, she said firmly, looking up. You didn't break my marriage, Lena. It was already cracked before I walked down that aisle. I just refused to see it. She hesitated, her voice softer now. But you made me see it. The words landed like a confession and a curse all at once. That night we didn't talk about love. We didn't talk about what came next. We just sat together in the quiet, two women trying to rebuild something from the pieces of what was lost. When she left, she paused at the door. Can I see you again? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. My chest tightened. You don't need me, Amelia. You need time. She smiled sadly. Time without you doesn't feel like healing. It feels like punishment. Over the next few weeks, we began to find each other again, slowly, cautiously. We'd meet for coffee in the mornings before she started her photography work. We'd walk by the beach, talk about everything and nothing. She laughed more now, lighter somehow, like the weight on her chest had finally lifted. But underneath all the laughter, there was a current neither of us could ignore. A quiet tension that hummed in the spaces between words. One evening we drove up the coast to Malibu, just to chase the sunset like we used to in college. The ocean stretched endlessly beside us, waves catching fire in the golden light. Amelia rolled down the window, letting the wind tangle her hair. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I'd known back then? She asked suddenly. Known what? That you loved me. she said, turning to me. Her tone wasn't accusing, it was gentle, almost wistful. My fingers tightened around the steering wheel. I try not to. She smiled faintly. You always were the cautious one. And you always jumped first. Maybe that's why we worked, she said quietly. You kept me grounded. I made you fly. I looked at her then, really looked, the freckles dusted across her nose, the faint scar on her chin from that camping trip, the way her eyes seemed to glow with some secret she'd never said aloud. And just like that, the years between us dissolved. We parked near the cliffs and sat on the hood of my car, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The sky bled into shades of orange and violet. Amelia leaned back on her hands, her dress fluttering in the wind. I used to think love was supposed to be easy, she said. Like in movies. Two people meet, they fit, and the rest just works. And now, she smiled sadly. Now I think love is about timing. You can meet the right person at the wrong time and spend years pretending you didn't. The silence that followed was heavy with truth. Amelia, I began, I don't want to be your second chance. I want to be your choice. Her eyes glistened in the fading light. You already are. That night she didn't leave. She stayed on my couch, wrapped in my blanket, her breathing soft, and even as the city hummed outside. I lay awake in my room, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sound of her heartbeat echoing in my memory. It was the closest thing to peace I'd felt in years. But peace never lasts long when love is this complicated. The next morning I found her in the kitchen making coffee like it was her own home. She wore one of my old sweatshirts, her hair a mess, her smile shy but real. For a brief, aching moment, it felt like we were already living the life we'd always wanted. Good morning, she said, handing me a mug. Morning, I murmured, trying not to stare at the way sunlight kissed her face. We sat in comfortable silence until she finally spoke. Ethan called last night. My stomach dropped. What did he want? He wants to talk. He says he deserves a conversation. Do you want to see him? She hesitated. I don't know. Part of me feels like I owe him closure. But another part of me doesn't want to reopen something I've already buried. I set my mug down, steadying my voice. Then don't. You don't owe anyone an explanation for wanting to be happy. Her eyes softened. You sound so sure. I'm not, I admitted. But I know what it's like to spend your life being what everyone else expects you to be. It kills you slowly. She reached across the table, her fingers brushing mine. You've always seen me, Lena. Even when I didn't. A few days later, she did meet Ethan. She needed to for herself. I didn't ask what they talked about, but when she showed up at my door that night, there were tears on her cheeks and relief in her eyes. It's really over, she whispered. I pulled her into my arms, and she clung to me like the tide to the shore. No words, no promises, just the quiet understanding that we'd both finally stopped running. From that day forward, things shifted. We began to move like gravity existed between us. We'd go grocery shopping together, share playlists, argue about movies. It wasn't perfect, it was real. And that was better. But the world doesn't make it easy for two women to fall in love openly, especially when one of them had just left a marriage. Whispers followed us, friends asking too many questions. Family dinners turned awkward. Still, Amelia never wavered. She would take my hand in public, smile at me in that defiant way that said I'm done hiding. And each time she did, something inside me healed. One evening, as autumn began to creep into the city, we returned to that vineyard. The one where she'd once said, I do, to the wrong person. It was empty now, the season long over. The vines were bare, the air cool and quiet. She stood at the same spot under the arch, tracing the wooden frame with her fingers. I used to think this place would haunt me, she said softly. But now, standing here with you, it feels like forgiveness. I joined her, slipping my hand into hers. Forgiveness for what? For not knowing myself sooner, she said. For hurting you. For pretending I didn't feel what I felt. I shook my head. You don't have to apologize for being human. She smiled, eyes shimmering with emotion. Then maybe I'll thank you instead. For what? For waiting. Even when I didn't ask you to. The wind rustled through the vines, carrying the faint scent of earth and memory. She stepped closer, her forehead resting against mine, and whispered, I don't want to waste another second pretending we're not exactly where we're meant to be. And for the first time in years I let myself believe her. That night, as the stars unfolded above us, I realized something simple but profound. Love doesn't always arrive wrapped in perfection. Sometimes it comes in pieces, broken, late, and utterly inconvenient. But when it's real, it doesn't need to be easy. Just needs to be true. And ours was. They say healing isn't linear. They're right. Some mornings Amelia woke up radiant, ready to chase the day. Other times she stared out the window for hours, quiet and distant, as though she was still learning how to breathe again. And me? I stayed. Not because she needed saving, but because I finally understood that love isn't about fixing someone. It's about holding space for who they are and who they're becoming. 6 months passed since the day under the vineyard arch. The world had changed in small, stubborn ways. She'd moved into her own apartment a few blocks from Minea, a cozy space filled with light, her photographs covering the walls like memories frozen in time. Sometimes I'd walk in and find her developing film, humming softly, her hair tied up in that messy bun that always made her look like the version of herself I'd fallen for a decade ago. Our love wasn't loud. It didn't demand grand gestures or dramatic promises. It was steady, quiet, patient like the ocean at dawn. But the world still watched. People whispered. A few friends kept their distance, unsure how to reconcile the woman who'd once worn a wedding gown with the one now holding another woman's hand. The hardest part was her family. Her mother, kind but cautious, called less often. Her father, conservative and proud, didn't speak to her for weeks after finding out. I remember the night Amelia told me, voice breaking. He said I embarrassed him, she whispered, sitting on my couch with her knees pulled to her chest. That love should make sense. That what I feel for you doesn't. I sat beside her, tracing gentle circles on her hand. Love isn't supposed to make sense. It's supposed to make you feel alive. She looked at me through tears. Then why does it hurt so much? Because it's real, I said softly. And real things are rarely easy. Time, however, has its own quiet way of softening even the hardest truths. Her parents eventually called again, small steps at first, polite check-ins that turned into longer conversations. One day, her mother came by with a basket of fresh lemons and a shy smile. She asked about you, Amelia told me afterward, grinning. I think she's starting to understand. I smiled back. You're impossible not to love. She'll see that. Amelia tilted her head, teasing. Does that include you? Especially me, I said, pulling her close. And in that moment, everything, every heartbreak, every silence, every wrong turn felt worth it. That spring, Amelia got her first gallery show. She'd spent months capturing portraits of women from all walks of life, scientists, mothers, musicians, immigrants, lovers. Each photograph glowed with honesty, raw and unfiltered, like she'd captured the soul of every woman who'd ever dared to be seen. The collection was called Unwritten Vows. When I asked her why, she smiled softly. Because love doesn't always look the way the world expects it to. Sometimes the promises that matter most are the ones you never said out loud. The night of the opening, the gallery buzzed with people. Soft jazz played in the background, wine glasses clinked, and for the first time in a long while, I watched her move through a room that was hers. Confident, fearless, free. Near the center of the exhibit hung a single photograph, different from the rest. It was a candid shot, me, sitting on the steps of the vineyard at sunset, barefoot, holding my shoes, unaware of the camera. The caption read, "The beginning." I turned to her, stunned. You took this? She nodded. That night, after the wedding. My voice faltered. Why didn't you tell me? Because I didn't know then what it meant, she said softly. Now I do. I blinked hard, swallowing the lump in my throat. What does it mean? She took my hand, right there in front of everyone, and said, it means I stopped pretending. Life after that was beautifully ordinary. We built routine Sunday breakfasts, late-night grocery runs, shared playlists that grew longer each month. There were days filled with laughter and days heavy with silence, but even in the quietest moments, I felt anchored. We learned how to argue without walking away, how to love without losing ourselves. And in that process, we found something more lasting than the first rush of romance. Peace. One afternoon, nearly a year later, we returned to the vineyard again. It had become our place, the beginning and the middle of everything. The vines were green this time, heavy with life. We walked along the path where she'd once worn her wedding dress, her hand brushing against mine as if grounding herself in the present. "You know what's funny?" she said, smiling. "I used to think that day ruined my life. And now I think it saved me," she said, "because it forced me to stop living for other people's stories and start writing my own." I smiled. "So what chapter is this?" She looked up at the sky, thoughtful. "The one where I finally stopped being afraid." We found a quiet spot under an old oak tree overlooking the hills. The air was warm, humming with cicadas. She took out her camera as always and snapped a picture of the view. Then she turned the lens on me. "What are you doing?" I laughed. "Documenting my favorite part of today." "Which is?" She lowered the camera, eyes soft. "You." Something about the simplicity of that moment undid Meth way. Her voice carried no hesitation, no shame. Just truth. I walked toward her, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You still make everything sound poetic." She smiled. "That's what love does." Later, as the sun dipped low, she reached into her bag and pulled out a small envelope. "For you," she said. Inside was a photograph, our photograph. The one from the gallery, printed on fine paper. On the back she'd written in neat handwriting, "To the girl who taught me that love doesn't need permission to be real." My throat tightened. "You always know how to ruin my mascara." She laughed, then grew quiet. "You know, I used to think falling in love with your best friend was the most tragic thing that could happen. And now?" I asked gently. "Now I think it's the luckiest." The drive back to Los Angeles was filled with comfortable silence. She played old songs from college, singing softly out of tune. The kind of small, imperfect joy that feels like home. When we reached the city, the skyline glowed in the distance, scattered with lights. She rested her head against the window, murmuring, "Do you ever think about where we'll be in 10 years? "All the time," I admitted. "But I've stopped planning it." She turned to me, curious. "Why?" "Because if the last few years have taught me anything," I said, "it's that the best things happen when you stop trying to control the story." She smiled sleepily. "So what do you call this?" I thought for a moment. "Not an ending. Maybe just, finally the right beginning." Months later, Amelia's work was featured in a national magazine. The headline read, "Love Reframed: How One Photographer Redefines Intimacy." They featured her portraits, her story, even a brief mention of the friend who became her muse. She showed me the printed issue over breakfast, her cheeks flushed with pride. "I think they're talking about you," she said playfully. I smirked. "Oh, really?" I couldn't tell. She leaned across the table, whispering, "They should have just said your name." And for the first time, I didn't flinch at being seen. Years later, we would laugh about how complicated it all began, the heartbreak, the confusion, the tears on her wedding day. But sometimes the most painful beginnings lead to the most beautiful lives. We never married, at least not in the traditional sense. We didn't need to. Our commitment wasn't written on paper or sealed with rings. It lived in the quiet certainty of mornings shared, of hands reaching out in the dark, of two hearts finally at ease. Love, I realized, isn't about the ceremony. It's about the courage to choose someone every single day, even when the world doesn't understand. On the anniversary of her first gallery show, we went back to the ocean. The same spot where we once chased sunsets and tried to make sense of impossible feelings. The waves crashed softly, the horizon endless. She handed me her camera and said, "Your turn." I laughed. "I don't take good pictures." "You don't have to," she said. "Just capture this." I lifted the camera. The lens focused on her face, the woman who had been my best friend, my heartbreak, my home. The wind played with her hair, sunlight dancing across her skin. She smiled and I clicked. When I looked at the photo, I realized it was perfect. Not because of lighting or composition, but because it was her. Alive. Free. Mine. That night, as we sat together watching the waves fade into darkness, she whispered, "If you could go back to that wedding day, would you change anything?" I thought about it for a long time. The pain, the confusion, the years we lost pretending. Finally I said, "No, because every wrong moment led us here." She nodded, her hand finding mine. "Then I guess this is where we were always meant to be." And under the vast California sky, with the ocean singing below and her warmth beside me, I finally believed her. Because sometimes love doesn't follow the path you planned. It stumbles. It breaks. It rebuilds. But when it's real, it always finds its way home. Thank you for listening. Like and subscribe to get notifications about next videos.